Well, next, after a rather dramatic week, a tanker in Russia's suspected shadow fleet set sail from where it was anchored off of western France today. It remains unclear, though, why the vessel, which was raided by French Navy commandos over the weekend and was reportedly being investigated over its nationality, was able to leave French waters. Emmanuel Macron had even said on Thursday that that ship was detained as a part of the European strategy to combat the oil revenue stream that is suspected of helping fund Russia's war efforts in Ukraine. For more, we're going to cross now to Prague to speak to Elisabeth Braw, research director, at the Association for International Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us today, Elisabeth. So first, I think it was a surprise for a lot of residents across the European continent to hear about the existence of this so-called shadow fleet. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, the shadow fleet has been growing for the past couple of years. It essentially became a thing when the Western countries imposed a price cap on Russian oil, thinking that with that price cap, it would not be viable to export. It would not be possible to export Russian oil above the price cap. But what Russian companies and the Russian government did instead was to turn to these shadow vessels, which sail outside the official world of shipping. And as a result, they are often very old, not always, but often very old, and also don't have proper insurance. So they have become a major issue in the Baltic Sea because most of them sail through the Baltic Sea. And this vessel in particular has caught the attention of the authorities in the past and now again.
So how do you interpret the fact that a tanker suspected of being a part of this fleet was permitted to resume its voyage today? What might that suggest, if anything?
So any country has to follow maritime rules, and in order to detain a vessel and keep it in detention, you have to show that there are deficiencies to it. You can't just say, well, I'm detaining this vessel because I don't want it to sail. And so what most likely happened is that France detained the vessel on suspicion of major deficiencies on that vessel, and then investigated or examined the vessel, and there were no major deficiencies that would allow France to keep it in detention, and it was allowed to sail on. The French authorities haven't really said anything yet about the reason why it was allowed to sail on, but that is most likely the reason.
Now, this has been described as, of course, a sanctions-busting fleet. You did detail that in your first response. Given rhetoric from most of Western Europe about Russia, not only about its war in Ukraine, but increasingly the threat that many are saying it represents to EU countries directly, it's rather surprising that this fleet exists and is able to circulate in European waters. I mean, the United States, for example, has very strict sanctions regulations that make it very difficult for people to counter its sanctions. So how or why is this allowed in the European Union?
Well, it's European Union countries, like the United States, try to follow international rules. Now, European countries have signed something that's called UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which governs the world's oceans. And if you have signed that treaty, the United States has not joined that treaty, but European countries have, then you have to abide by the rules. And those rules include allowing vessels to sail wherever they like, as long as it's something called innocent passage, meaning they sail through those waters. They don't park themselves there. And that is the reason that the shadow vessels are allowed to sail through the Baltic Sea on their way to their final destinations, which are usually India and China. And European governments keep facing calls for, to detain these vessels, to essentially ban them from the Baltic Sea. You cannot do that if you're a law-abiding country, and that is the dilemma for European countries today. They see these vessels that violate maritime rules on a daily basis, but yet they themselves have to abide by maritime rules because that's what respectable countries do.
Now, one of the concerns or suspicions is that some of those mysterious drones that have been sighted in European countries, notably in Denmark, in addition to Germany and Norway, could have been launched from this fleet. How likely do you think that is? And why is it so difficult, more generally speaking, to determine these ships' activities, be it launching drones or even sending divers to cut cables, as has also been suspected?
So regarding the drones at Copenhagen Airport, we don't know yet from where they were launched, but they have to have been launched from somewhere. So that is one of the working theories that the Danish authorities are exploring, are investigating. We may never find out from where those drones were launched, but what is beyond dispute, or what has been firmly established, is that some of these shadow vessels don't just transport Russian oil; they essentially dual use. They conduct other activities as well. For example, conducting surveillance as they sail through the Danish Straits or generally through the Baltic Sea. And as I think your viewers would be aware, several of them have also been suspected of cutting cables in the Baltic Sea. Now, the way that those cables have been cut is that the respective vessels have dragged their anchor behind them. And you can argue, you can claim in your defense, if you're one of the crew members of one of these vessels, that you didn't know that you were dragging the anchor, because you can say it just fell out, which is the defense that all these vessels, crews, have used. And a trial against such a crew completely concluded today, as it happens in Helsinki. So these vessels are up to no good either way. They transport oil in violation of sanctions. They don't follow maritime rules. And they can also add to their subversive activities, for example, by harming undersea cables.
Elisabeth Braw, thank you so very much for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you.